Now we're ready to apply what we've learned and film our first scene with our smartphone and stabilizer.
We'll show you how to film some of the classic documentary scenes that you might have to film for your video, whether that's people in meetings or going somewhere. In our case, we used actors, but the same principles would apply if you were using real subjects.
In this class, we'll have a chance to apply many of the things that we've already learned in our master class on visual storytelling. We'll look at how to cover a scene, different camera angles, and the concept of screen direction. Let's get to it. The basic goal of this class is how to cover a scene, which basically means how to tell a visual story that can be edited together. We'll think about camera angles and positioning, and the key is how can you tell a story that visually makes sense to the viewer. One of the key concepts is screen direction, or not crossing the invisible line. The idea is to draw a line through the scene and put all the cameras on one side of the action. This way, people on one side are looking in one way and looking in the other on the other. When you edit it together, it makes sense. It's important to always check your exposure. Use the Filmic app to adjust levels before you start shooting.
Another thing to be thinking about is camera operation. Are you keeping the shot still, or are you moving the camera a bit? If you're moving the camera, make sure that you're using very slow, steady movements. And when you're taking shots, it's okay to hold on the action for a while. This will give you more options when it comes to editing. There's another thing that we talk about, which is called the rule of thirds. It's a way of helping to create a balanced composition. In the rule of thirds, the idea is to use a third of the frame to put your action on. This draws the eye in and allows you to create a better image. Again, when you're framing, think about where people are looking and use the rule of thirds as a guide for doing that. Another option is framing over the shoulder. In this case, it allows you to kind of connect other people into the scenes. And it also helps to have cutaways of people listening to reverse the shot of someone talking in a scene. When you're filming, think of the order in which you're doing it. So it's good to start with a wide shot first because things may change as the scene goes on. In this case, we would start with a wider shot of the people talking and then go into a tighter shot of one of the subjects while they're talking. And remember, get close-ups and get faces. This is something that we want to see when we're watching a film. When you're using a smartphone, it means that you have to move very close to your subject because, again, your smartphone has a wide angle camera to it, so we have no option other than to get close to our subjects. Now, moving scenes are also sequences. So when we're shooting a moving scene, we want to remember that if we're having the subject move, let's say from left to right, that all the shots need to happen in the same way or show the same sort of action. Also, remember to get different angles. So if I'm filming someone walking, we want to get a shot from the front side of the person and then also behind them. When you're moving though, remember, be very careful because you're part of a live environment and you're focusing on your camera. It's very easy to run into things.
Well, we hope this review of how to cover a scene has been useful. Now let's look at these concepts in action.
So now that we have our stabilizer set up, we're going to show you how to use it to shoot a scene. Keep in mind that the smartphone, because it only has a wide-angle lens, limits what you're able to capture. So we're going to show you how to get some different shots to cut a sequence together. We have our two subjects behind us, and they're having a conversation, which is a classic type of scene you would film for a documentary. So we're going to show you how to cover a scene like that. Let's take a look.
As Brian films the scene here, there's some things to keep in mind. One is that when you film a scene like this, there are times when you can arrive and really film like a fly on the wall, i.e. not really interfering or getting involved with the people that you're filming. But there are other times when the people you'll be filming will ask you, where should we sit? What should we do? In this case, Brian positioned our subjects by the window where there's some good light and where he can get some nice clean angles. In order to get a variety of angles and especially the all-important close-ups that we'll need for editing, Brian needs to be able to move his camera in very close to his subjects, as you can see here. This will work fine when you're filming with people where you already have a comfortable relationship with, and it'll allow us to have the good close-up shots we'll need later on for editing. In this case, Brian knows these people well. They're people he's been filming with, and who, as is often the case when making a documentary, have gotten used to having around. So there's no problem here, but it's something you should think about and plan for in your shoot. With a DSLR camera, you'll be able to zoom in and have a chance to film people without getting so physically close, so it's a bit easier. It's also very important to think about how the different angles that you'd film will edit together. As you can see, Brian is moving around here on an axis, always keeping his camera angles on one side of the action. He's filming wide shots and tight shots, as we discussed in our visual storytelling lesson. He's trying to get all the different angles here by moving the camera from wide to close shot. You can see all this in our picture-in-picture edit. You can see where Brian is placing the camera and how it looks in his smartphone. Finally, it's important to use the Filmic app to make sure that your base exposure and focus is good. Here you can see Brian making these adjustments, which is something he actually did before he filmed the whole scene we've just shown you.
Stabilizers are also great for following action, whether that be a moving vehicle or some other moving object. In this instance, we're going to show you how to follow someone walking, which is a classic scene you would see in a documentary. We're going to film it two ways, one in front and one behind the subject. Just keep in mind that safety is important because you will be moving, you are the moving camera, and you want to make sure that you don't trip or run into someone else. Let's take a look at how it's done.
As always, Brian begins by adjusting the frame that he'll want to hold once things get moving. And remember, once you start walking, it's important to talk and communicate with the people you're filming. When you're going backwards, it's very important to keep an eye out where you're going. You can see Brian here about to do a second take with his walk with the stabilizer, and he's taking the time to once again use the Filmic app to adjust exposure and focus. Sometimes giving a little direction helps a lot.
Here we go, action. Look slightly up and out the window.
As always, when resetting a new shot with different lighting, Brian resets the settings with his Filmic app. It's also good sometimes to walk in the same place from two angles, one from behind your subject and one in front.